Is summer officially over? For students of all ages, beachgoers, and Capital Region folks with pools? Maybe. But the autumnal equinox doesn't officially click on for another 2 weeks or so. Most farmers markets and ice cream stands are still open through October. Coming up on this episode of The Eagle, we'll go over the week's top headlines.
And it's predicting that home heating bills in our territory will rise 39% this winter.
We'll get the latest on the discovery of the remains of a local teacher who went missing in March.
Her car was abandoned, it was unlocked, and then there were her hiking boots, and it was a wintry day.
And the Shopportunist joins us with some tips for football fans to help save money during the NFL season.
If you wait and purchase your tickets about 2 weeks in advance, you can save as much as 30%.
This is The Eagle, a Times Union podcast, a look inside our newsroom. I'm Jessica Marshall.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring in you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union member today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome to The Eagle. I'm Jessica Marshall. Right now, let's discuss what appeared in the Times Union and on timesunion.com this week. Back again are we with Times Union Editor-in-Chief Casey Seiler. Let's talk about the top headlines. We'll start with the fact that the COVID-19 boosters that cover off on some of the new strains are now in the Capital Region and available at pharmacies and doctors' offices. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, these are the new bivalent COVID booster doses that are showing up in pharmacies right now and, arriving in stock just as a new subvariant, which is BA 4.6, of course, is taking hold all across the Northeast and in other parts of the country. Both Pfizer and Moderna are offering these, and they say that while there are some age differences, they're for people who obviously have completed their initial, the primary vaccine series and have received their last booster dose at least 2 months ago. And if you've had COVID recently, you should wait 3 months. Of course, we say that because so many people, at least, here at the Times Union, we've noted that the last couple of months have really been sort of the toughest in terms of people showing up positive. Happily, while some of those cases have been kind of rough, hospitalization rates, both in our organization, are very low, and they remain kind of similar to the low points they were at about a year ago. So, if you haven't been boosted yet, get boosted. And these new shots seem to be the way to go as we deal with this, constantly mutating virus.
Speaking of low hospitalization rates and low positivity rates, or lower positivity rates, that has led Governor Kathy Hochul to do something this week involving public transportation and masking. What happened?
Yeah, on public transportation, it is no longer required to wear a mask, and that is statewide, subways, buses, trains, you name it. And the governor is citing those lower levels of infections in saying that people are now free to, make their own health choices on public transportation, and to please be respectful of people who continue to wear masks, and as well as people who do not wear masks on public transportation. Mask mandates remain in place for healthcare facilities and nursing homes, hospitals, whatnot, which of course is a reflection of the fact that many people there are in immunocompromised states. It also means that children on buses to school will no longer have to wear masks as well. And it's clear that this is being timed to a lot of the questions that are being asked as kids head back to school. The bigger question here is whether or not the state of emergency will remain in place. The current state of emergency runs out, expires next week. And of course, Hochul is under political pressure to end it. And we will just have to wait and see what happens. And what she has said is the same as what Governor Cuomo said before he stepped down, which is that these decisions are going to be based on the numbers. And of course, the numbers are the justification for lifting the mask mandate on public transportation. So there you go.
All right, we will see. Stick to our Capital Confidential section on timesunion.com for the latest on that. Let's switch gears a little bit. Looking forward to the weather starting to get a little colder. National Grid has given us some not so great news, or at least we've gleaned that there's some not so great news about heating prices this winter. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, National Grid is the dominant power utility in the capital region, and it's predicting that home heating bills in our territory will rise 39% this winter. That's an increase of about $50 more per month over last year, as Larry Willison reports.
That's no small amount.
It is indeed no small amount. It totes up to about $260 higher over the 5-month, winter period from last year. It's not good news. It's also not necessarily surprising news, considering what, of course, has happened to other fuel costs over the course of, the really almost the last year, but especially since the Russian invasion of Ukraine jacked up fuel prices really globally, or almost globally. It's based, what National Grid predicts as the price is based on average use of 143 therms of natural gas a month. But of course, that can change based on the weather. If it's colder, the price goes up. If it's warmer, you don't need to spend as much to heat your house. But it is especially tough as we are reading all about all of the impacts that global economic trends have. This is one of those costs that falls much more heavily upon people at lower income levels, because they spend a higher percentage of their income on housing, utility costs, and food than do households that have more disposable income. So not very good sign for the winter months ahead. Indeed.
All right, let's move over to something that was a little bit more hopeful. A lot of people are looking forward to the fact that Chick-fil-A is officially, we've talked about this before, but now it's official. They're opening a location in the region. Tell us more.
Yes, well, a second location in the region, because they had already announced that there was going to be a Clifton Park location, that's in the works, and now we find out that folks in Rensselaer County are likely to get a new one as well. A permit has been awarded to a Chick-fil-A project at 502 North Greenbush Road, and this is on Route 4, accessible to Route 4. It's a huge retail booming strip, very close to the I-90 connector. If you love those little chicken sandwiches, this is a reason to be joyful. Right across the street, basically, from the Cumberland Farms, and very close to a Walmart, a Home Depot, you name it.
And no airline tickets required.
Yes, you are referring, of course, to the fact that the first Chick-fil-A in the region was on the far side of the security barricade at Albany International Airport. And we have done stories on people who would buy a low-cost airplane ticket purely to get in to buy huge bags of Chick-fil-A, and then not even take the flight, just carry them right back out again, which seemed like a long way to go for a moist chicken sandwich.
You won't have to go so much further now, just across the river or up the Northway. All right, cool. Casey, thank you so much, and we will check back in with you next week.
Jess, thanks a lot.
As As always, you can learn more about all of the topics and issues we discuss on this podcast at timesunion.com. And you can follow Casey Seiler on Twitter at Casey Seiler, all one word. Let's move on now to talk about another story that has made headlines this week and for much of the last 6 months. In late March, a 42-year-old Delmar woman named Megan Marohn went missing. The Shaker High English teacher was on a weekend getaway alone in western Massachusetts. This week, her remains were discovered in a wooded area in Lee, Massachusetts. But the question of what happened to her remains unanswered. Paul Nelson was the reporter on duty when the Berkshire County DA announced they'd found remains that were most likely Marohn's. A few days later, on Monday, it was confirmed that the remains were indeed Marohn's. Prior to those announcements, at the end of August, Times Union reporter Kathleen Moore had written an article on what we all know so far about Marohn and her disappearance. She was a writer, a poet, an ardent environmentalist, and an English teacher at Shaker High School in Latham. She'd been on a leave of absence from her job. Friends online intimated that she was struggling with her mental health, that she'd taken a break from work to gather herself, and to get away from a male coworker who was allegedly harassing her. The school would not release any information on the circumstances of her leave. They called it a personnel matter. Marohn's brother, however, Peter Naple, told Western Mass News in April that he didn't know the full story, but he knew a little.
I do know that what happened at school caused her a lot of heartache.
That was all we knew, until last Friday, when Paul Nelson picked up the story. You were there when the news first broke that there were remains. So tell me about how that went down.
Yeah, so, this is, like I said, just a tragic and sad story. Megan Marohn is a teacher, an English teacher at Shaker High School with the North Colony School District. And she had taken a trip, driven from her home in Bethlehem, where she lived with her elderly father. As a matter of fact, I believe she was actually taking care of her father at the time that she took this trip. It was just supposed to be a chance for her to do some hiking and just kind of decompress and just, rest and relax. And right, yeah, so she drove to Massachusetts, checked into the Red Line Inn in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Checked in on March the 24th. It was supposed to be, she's supposed to stay there up until I think March the 29th. Checked in and was supposed to go hiking. She talked with her brother maybe 2 days after she arrived on the 24th. His name is Peter Naple. So she spoke with him, and by all indications, everything was going good. Then the very next day, he tried to reach out to her. She wasn't responding. Then on the 27th is when law enforcement authorities located her car in Lee, Massachusetts at a park. The name of the park is Longcoat Park. It's roughly about 413 acres. It's a preserve there. And, it's noteworthy because her car was abandoned. It was unlocked. And then there were her hiking boots, and it was a wintry day. So that obviously that caught the attention of authorities. And then, that started a pretty intense search for her, extensive search for her. It was sort of a combination of many different law enforcement authorities, up around Western Mass there in Lee. And they weren't able to come up with anything. And her brother, Peter Naple, who I mentioned earlier, he also coordinated a search of volunteers, and they pretty much, combed that area around Longcoat Park and still weren't able to come up with anything. Now, I should take a step back because her cell phone, the last, ping that they were able to detect, it was, around, that park. So authorities were kind of hopeful. And it indicates then that she probably set off on the trail to go hiking. So fast forward to this past Friday, and it was the Berkshire District Attorney's Office, as well as the Massachusetts State Police, both put out a news release saying that her body or the remains of what they suspected to be, Miss Marohn were found in pretty much in that immediate area where, they found her car. So just a sad story, like I said.
Yeah, absolutely tragic. I mean, has there been any indication since her remains have been identified that maybe what happened to her?
No, there hasn't been any indications, and there's a lot of unanswered questions as to exactly what happened. But law enforcement authorities have not released any indication of whether they suspect foul play or what have you, and that's just, like I said, left a lot of unanswered questions. And I spoke to Craig Apple, because I should mention, he's the Albany County sheriff, and he had a search and rescue team that was a part of that effort to try to locate her. And like I said, that was up in the air and on the ground. They used canine dogs and drones just to, any attempt to try to find her. And her brother, he just became sort of her advocate. He just was very fierce in advocating for her. The family had put up a $50,000 reward for any information, that will lead to, her discovery. And he also set up a GoFundMe site, to raise money. He hired a private investigator, through the money that they raised from the GoFundMe page. And he also was on social media. I think there was a Twitter page that he set up for hopeful that anybody who saw or heard her or had any information about her would at least come forward. So unfortunately, it didn't pan out. And when I spoke to him on Friday, he was kind of, resigned to the fact, because back then on Friday, they just suspected that was her remains. And, it was actually confirmed by the medical examiner's office on Labor Day on Monday that it indeed were her remains. And even when I spoke to him on Friday, he seemed resigned to the fact that, that was his sister's remains.
Was he surprised? I mean, I know he must have been, obviously upset, but was he surprised?
He was saddened. I don't know if he was surprised. He was just very saddened because, he was hopeful. Like I said, he was active on social media, put up the reward, had the GoFundMe page. So he was still hopeful, that somebody would see her, that she would come back home alive. And, this happened. And he's told me that now she's, resting with, their mother who had passed away, before this all happened.
There's currently no information on any memorials that may be planned for Marohn. But what about the fact that she was on a leave of absence from work? How does that fit into the story now that her remains have been identified?
They were pretty tight-lipped about the circumstances around her, because she had taken a leave of absence when she disappeared. And, there was a lot of questions about, why she took that leave of absence. They had said it was pretty much, the extent of their statement was that it was for personal reasons. But then there were some of her friends that were posting on social media that apparently there was a colleague who might have been stalking her. And, this was her chance to kind of get away from her. Get away from him, excuse me. So that all came out. And, when the investigation was being conducted by the Lee Police Department, they were the lead agency. And I got to give kudos to Kathleen Moore, because she wrote an excellent story in late August that sort of, did a deep dive into some of the circumstances. And she spoke to the Lee police chief at the time. And he, talked about the fact that as part of their ongoing investigation, that they had looked into this colleague who was allegedly stalking her, and they had ruled him out. He was never publicly identified, but they ruled him out as a person that might have been involved in her disappearance.
You can follow Paul Nelson on Twitter at @APaulNelson. After the break, the Shopportunist has great money-saving tips for football fans.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring in you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union member today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. Hey, football fans, are you ready for the NFL season kickoff? Times Union Shopportunist Shannon Fromma joins the huddle with us now to share a few tips for saving money on everything from tickets to TVs. The NFL kicked off literally on Thursday night, and this is the first big weekend of football that we're looking at here. And you recently wrote about all the ways that you can watch football and save money. So let's talk about that. What are some of the things that are going on? Let's start with the games themselves. Like if you want to go to a game, the ticket prices are pretty high normally, right?
Yeah. So, America's affinity for the gridiron game will be a blow to some wallets. Ticket prices are up, but they've kind of always been high. The average ticket price for an NFL game is about $150, according to data compiled by ticketing site SeatGeek. And that seems like on the low end, and that's probably for really nosebleed seats. There are a few ways you can save. If you wait and purchase your tickets about 2 weeks in advance, you can save as much as 30%. People are looking to unload if plans change. If you have a few friends who are fans of the same team, you can consider splitting the cost of a season ticket. New York Giants season ticket price, for instance, is just under $1,000, and that's good for 8 to 9 home games. So if you split that among, 1 or 2 people, you're looking at spending about $110 per person per game. Those, again, are nosebleed seats, but hey, it's better than nothing.
You're in the stadium, right?
Yeah, you're in the stadium. You're there. You get to experience,
I've only been to one NFL game in my entire life, and I was 13 years old, and it was the Buffalo Bills.
That's the only professional sport I've never gone to in person, pretty much because of the price, because it's so scary when I look at it. So, but yeah, part of traveling to see a game in person is tailgating. Tailgating is also going to cost quite a bit more this year. A Wells Fargo report showed that, with gas prices and airfare still high, transportation's up. Meanwhile, bus fares remained relatively flat through this whole pandemic. So public transportation or chartered bus service may be the most cost-effective way to go. And when you're tailgating, you're often cooking food. I mean, that's kind of part of it all. And food prices are up. We all know that. Chicken prices especially are high. They're about 18% more than last year. But if you go for something like pork ribs, it's a little cheaper. Or you can just buy, stick with chips and dips, on the go options, because they tend to be lower cost. You can do party trays and veggie spreads, but just, make sure you cut your own fruits and veggies and don't get those expensive pre-made trays. Just handle it yourself at home.
Wow, you really looked at this from all angles.
But one of my favorite things to do is to go out to a local restaurant or sports bar, to catch the game.
Yes. All right. So let's talk about that.
There are a lot in this area that offer some great deals. A lot of them haven't really announced what's to come. A few have. Dawn's Victory Sports Cafe in Albany is offering food and drink specials during NFL games on Sundays. Rivers Casino has $4 beers during professional and college football games. One of my favorite places to go is O'Toole's in Queensbury because appetizers are half off, and they also offer an array of drink specials. I know Peabody's in Saratoga Springs also features some wings specials. There's a lot around, and that's one of the best ways to experience the excitement of football while not spending too much money.
Exactly. You're around other football fans. Usually everybody's cheering or, jeering, depending on what team is playing.
and often there's like a little bit of rivalry, if you're playing a team, someone else.
The Giants are playing
Exactly.
what are their rivals? I don't know who their rivals are.
Yeah, who knows these days? I don't think there's too many, but I'm a big Broncos fan, so there's not as many of us around here. So oftentimes we're kind of like holding our own at a sports bar, so it's a lot of fun.
All right, but what if you don't want to leave your house?
Well, that's actually probably the way to save the most money, obviously, because you're not going out, and it is, the cost of a television, if you're looking for an upgrade, that's really hasn't gone up at all recently. What has gone up are those cable and satellite prices and some of those streaming services. But the streaming services are going to be your best bet to save money. Sling TV, Fubo TV, YouTube TV, and Hulu Live are your best bets because they offer live in-market games. The NFL recently launched a new app too. If It's called NFL Plus. If you're okay watching the football game on a mobile phone or tablet, you can pay just $5 a month to watch all in-market games, primetime broadcasts, and the playoffs. So that's a really economical option. Yeah, if like me, you're a fan of a team that's out of market, it gets a little trickier because DirecTV offers the NFL Sunday Ticket, but that's super expensive. I know if you have someone that's very techy available in your home, you can look into VPN services, but that's not us. So
You
just
can
gotta
always
get a
listen
little
to it on the
creative.
radio too, right? So you're
Exactly.
listening.
Follow it online. There are ways and means. You do what you can to support your team.
And of course, if you are a really big football fan and still none of those options appeal to you, you could also go to college games, right? There's one right here in our backyard.
Oh,
in Albany.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a great way to experience the excitement of a live game without forking over a ton of money. And then you're also supporting kind of our hometown teams.
Absolutely. Or you could go out to Massachusetts, or you could go downstate. There, you don't have to root for Albany, but it is convenient.
Right. And it's fun.
Is there anything else?
Keep an eye out. Fan gear is priced really well at this time of year now that the football season is underway. There's a lot of good sales out there at Dick's Sporting Goods, the NFL shop, places like that. So if you're looking to suit up, you can do so for less.
All right, that's it for this week. I'm Jessica Marshall at Jess_on_ice on Twitter. We'll be back next week with another look inside the newsroom here at the Times-Union. In the meantime, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, or head over to timesunion.com for the latest news and features. The Eagle is a production of the Times-Union. It's produced and edited by me, Jessica Marshall, with help from the Times-Union digital team and the newsroom. Special thanks to Casey Seiler, Paul Nelson, and Shannon Fromma for their contribution to this episode.